Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar, Tips and Tools for Effective Virtual Programming. This webinar is presented by the Ontario Nonprofit Network and Imagine Canada. As we start today, our team would like to acknowledge the devastating impacts of recent events and the deepened grief and trauma of Black communities. We know that systemic racism exists, and we know that this is unacceptable and it must change. The Ontario Nonprofit Network and Imagine Canada stand in solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, and people of color colleagues and community members and their loved ones. We'd like to thank our Black colleagues who are contributing their talent in the nonprofit sector. Thank you to the Black activists and allies who have put their personal safety and wellness on the line for systemic change. We recently shared concrete policy changes put forward by network members of the Black Health Alliance, and we encourage you to read them and amplify them. I'll be sharing them with you again in our follow-up email. My name is Melanie Rodriguez, and I'm the Communications and Network Engagement Manager here at ONN. If you're new to ONN, welcome. We're a provincial network advocating for the 58,000 nonprofits and charities in Ontario. We focus on public policy, advocacy, and services to strengthen Ontario's nonprofit sector as a key pillar of our society and our economy. If you're already a member of ONN, thank you so much for your support. Our public policy research and advocacy work would not be possible without you. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, such as a visual lag, or maybe you're having troubles with your audio, we recommend you closing your browser and reopening it. If you're still having challenges, please feel free to reach out to us. You can type them in the chat box to your right. And now, while we wait for a few more people to join the webinar, I'm just going to do a quick poll about what you're hoping to learn in this webinar. So are you interested in discovering how you can design online programming that is engaging and effective? Are you hoping to learn how you can determine what types of virtual programming make sense for your organization's goals and audiences? Are you looking forward to interesting, innovative examples of how other nonprofits have transitioned their programming online? Lastly, are you interested in learning specific information through our question and answer session with our panelists today? I'll leave this open for a moment. Great. So it seems like the majority of you are really interested in learning how we can create engaging virtual programming that matches the needs of your audience and your nonprofit. So we are going to be covering all these topics today. We're going to be covering them through 4 8-minute presentations with our panelists, including Liz Scanlon, Anjali Solanki, Yao Togobo, and Aaron Kang. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to type them in the chat box on your right. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible during the question and answer session, which will be at the end of the 4 presentations. And to answer your most common question, which is, will I receive this slide deck? And yes, you will. We'll send you this recording, slide deck, and a list of additional resources within 1 week of this webinar. Before we get started, Laurence, the Manager of Government Relations and Advocacy at Imagine Canada, will share our land acknowledgement to the discussion on the land we are working on. Thank you, Laurence.
Thank you, Melanie. Pleasure to be here as always. I recently moved back to Montreal, as many of you by now probably know, and where myself and 2 of my colleagues live and work. So I'd like to acknowledge that we are located on unceded Indigenous land. The Kanyen-Kehaka Nation, commonly known as Mohawk, is recognized as the custodians of the land and waters on which I am today. Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is the home of a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurence. Our first speaker today is Liz Scanlon. Liz is the Senior Manager of Public Affairs for Heart and Stroke, and she's worked in public affairs and communications in both the for-profit and nonprofit sector for close to 20 years. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience and expertise with us, Liz.
Not at all, and thank you for having me. And I just want to acknowledge that everyone out there is doing the work in really challenging, difficult times. So thank you for it, and thank you for coming in today. So I will say Heart and Stroke in the nonprofit world is probably not known for being, an incredibly nimble, fast-moving organization. We're one of the older, sort of larger bureaucratic, probably in people's minds. And the only thing I wanted to sort of point out with this slide, actually, to start off the conversation, is that on March 16th, when we began to see the impact of COVID-19 on our constituents, and I'll just sidebar here and say that when I talk about our constituents, we're primarily talking about people with lived experience of heart disease and stroke and their caregivers, and their family members. That's who we talk about. Our first impulse was to reach out to those folks through the peer support communities that we facilitate, to make sure that we were continuing to have a real understanding of what was going on the ground, what people's lived reality was. And I think it's important to point that out because that has really informed everything that we have done since, and keeping an eye on how people were experiencing this whole situation has been critical to inform all of our follow-up. So that's all I wanted to say on that slide with many words on it. Next slide, please. The other thing that's been really helpful for us is keeping our eyes on the four, we call them our mission pillars, but they're basically just the four big buckets of work that we do as an organization. And this has been articulated for a long time. This is something that everybody lives and breathes in the organization, but it's been a very good opportunity while things are moving quickly to make sure that we're doing the right gut check. What is this serving, and who is this serving, and is this fitting into these pillars that we are so focused on? So next slide, please. And I don't know that we would have articulated these principles going in, but I think these are probably more honestly described as learnings that we've had through this process. And so I just want to touch on these super quick and then give two quick examples of the many ways that we've pivoted and moved to work in different ways over the last 3 months. I've already talked about our mission pillars. The second piece there that I think is probably true of many organizations out there, we've lost about half of our staff as a result of COVID-19 and the impact on our fundraising. And so that's a lot of friends and colleagues, unfortunately, not with the organization any longer, but it also is a lot of capacity gone. And so we've had to be really clear about staying focused, letting go of things that are meaningful for many of us in terms of the work, but hoping that we'll be able to come back to it later as things change again, but really staying focused on what matters right now. As I mentioned, we need to understand our audiences, what the lived reality is, and I talked about our facilitated peer support network as a way to do that, but we also did a big survey through all of our online channels. I think it collected about 1,700 respondents, so really a good response. And we asked, obvious questions about how their healthcare was being delivered, what their experiences have been around caregiving. But we also asked really fundamental questions about the social determinants of health. Are people's housing, they have secure housing, do they have access to food? Really, trying to understand as broadly as possible what people were experiencing through this whole situation. We've also tried to build all of our programming with people with lived experience at the table as much as possible. Hence, I'm very proud of that Patients Included certification, because that was specifically for a series of webinars we have developed in the last 3 months for people with lived experience around rehab at home and all kinds of different things that people need to do in terms of self-management and self-care in these times. And so that's a big important factor for us in terms of keeping that voice front and center. And then the last two things, working in partnership, those are obvious, but I think right now everybody's capacity is down, everybody's finding the needs increased, so working in partnership is even more important. And then the last one is something that I think as an organization we struggle with, and this is more of a learning. Don't let the enemy, the perfect be the enemy of the good. In other words, we have to move quickly sometimes, and we love to iterate and tinker with ideas and get things perfect. And sometimes that's just not possible when things are moving super fast. So that would be another learning. So if I could move to the next slide, two very quick examples. And the things that are in common here, I think, are that these two things are things that we did pre-COVID, we've done for a long time. We have iterated the way that we've done them right now. But the other important thing is that right now what we're doing is learning and building and growing so that as we move into recovery, as the healthcare system starts to come back online in a different way, that we can take what we've learned through this experience and apply it to the way that we deliver going forward and the way that the healthcare system delivers and the way that we advocate going forward. So very quickly, one of the important things we do is support healthcare professionals with their learning. And there's a myriad of ways that we do that. Some of them are on this slide. But I wanted to talk about stroke best practice in particular because it's very esoteric and involves a lot of researchers and clinicians and people with lived experience coming to the table. And we do this every year. And every year we look at what's the evidence and what's the research that's coming out. And then we communicate to healthcare providers about how to apply that in their caregiving. So we realized that with everything changing so quickly, we needed to create stroke best practice guidelines for COVID specifically. People aren't getting in front of their practitioners in the same way. I mean, everything is up in the air. And so a process that normally takes conferences and meetings and months of people and tons of people, and we actually continued to engage all the stakeholders we did, but all of that became virtual. And in a matter of weeks, we were able to iterate a stroke best practice guideline for the COVID era, which was really, I think, important for caregivers to understand how they could be providing care in these times. And then the idea is then, what did we learn from this around virtual care, around access to rehabilitation, all of these other things that we can learn and base our next steps on as we start to go into the recovery phase. And the last example on the next slide is Heart Smart Kids. And it's a very straight ahead health promotion program that we have done and delivered in classrooms with teachers with hard copy books that we would send out across the country for a couple of years now. But the team obviously recognized in homeschooling and online learning that we needed to get some of these resources online quickly. And so I can't say that this was particularly innovative. I mean, we put a whole bunch of stuff online and we did a social campaign and we got tons of pickup and tons of engagement, which is great. But then the interesting thing is now that's actually giving us some ways to think about and scope out how we really make it a digital program so that going forward, this is something that can be delivered online in a more sort of best practice digital way than we were able to do for the period of COVID, despite the fact that it's actually been very popular and lots of pickup. So those are sort of two examples of many, but I think, for us, again, the theme is that what can we learn and how can we carry this forward so that we're continuing to iterate as things change and hopefully stabilize soon. Last slide that I wanted to share because I referenced partners, but, and this is actually just a slide I pulled from another deck, but it's something just to, it's important for us as an organization. We're conveners. We bring people together. That's what we do. And so I just want to acknowledge that all of the work that we've done in the last 3 months has been facilitated and really has depended on participation from a lot of other folks. And so again, the importance of being able to continue to convene and bring people together in this time has been really important.
Great, thank you so much, Liz, for sharing with us. So our second speaker today is Anjali from the STEPS initiative. Anjali oversees STEPS community and agency programs, including developing the partnerships that make them possible. She's a painter and a public artist with over 15 years of experience in community engagement, community programming, and urban research. Thank you, Anjali.
Thanks. Erin, you can just jump to the next slide. We have a brief presentation to share what we do and also how we've pivoted. So to give a brief background, STEPS is a charitable public art organization that develops one-of-a-kind public art plans, installations, and engagement strategies that really foster communities. Next slide. So our work is very public, very in the public realm, very physical, but it also maintains a strong commitment to equity, especially in the areas of youth, community, and emerging artist capacity building. So given that our work is so physically based, when COVID-19's public health requirements involved being physically distanced, we had to be very creative on how to continue meeting our mandate in different ways. Next slide. And with that in mind, we also recognize that public art was one of the few cultural experiences that people were able to access safely. Next slide. We realized many arts and cultural institutions had shut their spaces. And so one of the few ways that people were accessing arts and culture was through public art. And this was especially important in equity-seeking communities outside of the downtown core of Toronto. So the need to continually plan for these projects and shift the community engagement approaches for us were very essential. So this is an example of a project that we're doing in the north of the city, and it's in a lower income high-rise area. So there's not a lot of park spaces in this area. There's not a lot of ease and access to get out of people's physical spaces. So the need to moving forward beyond COVID-19 to continue to really ensure that these projects would be realized has been very essential to the way in which we do our work. Next slide. We also really saw public art as a form of local economic development for many folks, especially artists. Next slide. We felt that because so many artists had been dramatically impacted, their income sources had been cut because of inability to exhibit, maintaining our existing commitments where possible, as well as cultivating paid opportunities were essential for us. And so this is an example of where we continued with a call for artists in partnership with Toronto Community Housing, Tridal, and Art Starts, and just really continuing, even if it was a bit of a delayed process, to continue to ensure that this process was moving forward to provide income support, an opportunity for artists. We also, next slide. We also shifted a lot of our programming online. And so this is an example of a project that we were doing with a human rights photography group called Jayu. And it was supposed to involve extensive in-person workshops and have emerging artists go out and shoot new work. And because of the public health requirements, this was no longer possible. So instead of disbanding the project, we shifted to having online workshops and have artists submit existing work to the call, so that they wouldn't, at the current time that the call was released, they weren't going out into public and going against some of the public health guidelines. Next slide. So as a result, we received 68 submissions from across the GTA of emerging artists, and these artists were based between the ages of 18 to 29. And in conjunction, we also hosted 2 online photography workshops, which had over 30 attendees. So it was, we had to move very fast to roll this project out. Similar to what Liz was saying, you know, being nimble and responsive was essential. And we've been really blown away with the submissions that were provided. Next slide. We also have an initiative called Patch that puts public art on the exterior of construction sites. And this is an important income generation opportunity for many artists. And we were, just before the pandemic, we were in the process of onboarding 34 new artists, which would make them eligible for projects and income generation opportunities. And we really did not want to hold this process up. So we shifted to do orientations through Zoom and doing onboarding online, and instead of the planned in-person sessions. And actually, this is something that we're hoping to keep and as an option in addition to in-person orientations, because it really allowed for fewer sessions to have to be hosted, and we were able to have a lot of really positive feedback from the artists participating in these orientation sessions. Next slide. In addition to artists being dramatically impacted, the climate has really hurt a lot of main streets. And so we're currently in the midst of rolling out an art challenge specific to business improvement areas that would work to reanimate these central neighborhood hubs, while also actively involving artists in the process, which would, the intention is for these activations and installations to be both online as well as have physical components that act as a creative and safe draw to reanimating our main streets in a safe way. Next slide. In a similar vein, we have also partnered with the Canadian Urban Institute to release a design challenge where design practitioners can submit ideas to help further support main streets on a national level to encourage safe investment back into our main street and business improvement areas. Next slide. We have also really shifted to host several calls in which artists and community members are able to creatively showcase work either through windows or front porches or lawns, so that people could safely produce and exhibit creative animations and really bring communities together using art as a safe cultural experience. Next slide. So some of the examples that we've done that through is a call for artists called Insiders, where artists were invited to submit their proposals. We received 117 submissions from across Canada on public art concepts that could be exhibited in people's front windows or balconies or front yards or courtyards that would have both an online and a physical component, really bringing art into neighborhoods and communities. Next slide. Similarly, we did a call called Home Base for community members, people who may not necessarily identify as artists per se, but we've been seeing in our own neighborhoods many people putting in their windows encouragement for people to stay strong and to support one another. And so through this call, we received over 30 submissions from across Toronto, where community members have developed public art concepts that would engage communities from private spaces. So this was an online call, but it has a physical component as well. Next slide. We also developed a program called Create Space that showcased the work of equity-seeking artists through online studio tours and art making workshops to raise the profile of BIPOC and queer artists, and also at the same time showcase their work, but also provide engagement in different ways for the public to interact with their different art forms. Next slide. We also, during this time, have developed a new speaker series that targeted emerging and mid-career artists that was free and online. And through this programming, we've been able to host over 60 participants and identify current trends and topics of interest in public art for the artists that we work with. And it also allowed us to broaden our reach beyond the GTA and to provide the support nationally and even internationally. Next slide. We've also been leveraging initiatives that we're not necessarily creating, but that the other organizations have been leading the way with. For example, the Social Distancing Festival, and looking at ways in which we can showcase the work of Canadian artists globally and foster more appreciation for public art projects that may have been put on hold. And so doing this, participating in these types of festivals is something else that we've been a part of. Next slide. We're also really continuing our commitment to equity-seeking communities, and we're currently hosting a series of workshops online where participants will be mailed out art-making materials and works that and the works that they create through these workshops will be digitally collected and shared with a lead mural artist named Shellac Attack. We'll be integrating these works, the artist will be integrating these works into a final mural concept. So it's allowing us to do that community engagement and that lead up that will result into a final physical public art piece. And next slide. We're also really looking beyond COVID, and we're visioning and how our work can be a part of the shift in placemaking and how that's realized, in a hope that we can shift the dialogue to better integrate arts and culture into the conversation. Also recognizing the importance of involving community, especially equity-seeking community members, and being central in the conversation of city building and placemaking. And so on this slide is listed some of the ways in which we're working on doing that. And last slide, that's me for today. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anjali. It is incredible how many partnerships and programs that you guys have transitioned online in such a short amount of time. Wow.
Yeah.
You guys are very busy. So our third speaker today is Yao Gobo. Yao is a program manager for CE Center for Young Black Professionals. Yao brings a wealth of knowledge and international experience interweaved with a rich West African background, a London English perspective, a hip-hop exterior, and a current Canadian reality, which makes his writing, delivery, and facilitation such an intriguing combination. Thank you so much, Yao, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I know I came to the party very late, and I was debating whether I should be part of this discussion, but I felt it was important to have this perspective being represented with regards to the work that we do at sea. So my presentation is definitely not as flashy and impressive as the ones that have come before. So you'll be hearing a lot of my voice, and I hope you'll be able to get something of value from whatever it is I'm able to share. To the previous speakers, there's phenomenal works that have been done, and any way that we were able to support, you know, we definitely want to offer that extend that hand of friendship. Okay, so just to give a little bit of context about the C Center for Young Black Professionals. So we're an organization or a charity that specifically focuses on Black youth from the ages of 19 to 29, and those who are considered to be most vulnerable people and furthest from the labor market. It's about how can we work with that vulnerable population and to develop a pipeline where we can get them into doing productive work. So there are 5 areas within a Canadian labor economy where we have found that there was a lot of labor gaps. And number 2, there was a dearth of Black people within those industries. So we offer programming to focus on those 5 areas, and those five areas are film. We had a program in partnership with POV 3rd Street last year, and we were on the verge of doing it this year before COVID kicked in, but I'll come to that. We've got the trades, our trades programming. We've also got our social services programming. We had a program that was done in partnership with Harriet Tubman community organization called Niche. Our hospitality program called Kitchen Masters. So we focus literally on the culinary arts and culinary skills. And then we've got digital, our digital tech programs. We've got various different streams of digital effects, one being C-Tech, another one being VFX. So all of these programs basically are in-person programs. We need a client base to develop different cohorts with, and we also make sure we have small focused cohorts. So When COVID first happened, I remember that our ED sending a letter around telling us that we're going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. And in my head, I mean, we had just developed a partnership with Toronto Employment Social Services to be an official vendor, and we were just getting our early first programs about to get off the ground, and literally we're at the printers developing our promotion material. And all of a sudden we hear about the COVID and quarantine and working from home. That Monday, we must be sent home on a Friday. That Monday, we said we're going to continue doing our early mornings meetings as we usually do it, using go-to meetings like we're doing right now. And to be honest, it was a reflection of visionary leadership. Our executive director, Advocacy, she was very much like, listen, we don't know how long we're going to be at home for. This could be indefinite, but what we must do is we must develop our argument that we are still relevant in this time. So we need to, this is not the time for standing still, and not for time for enjoying your home, working from home, enjoying time with the family. It's the time for us to get work and get busy immediately. We need to, our primary focus is our members. That's what we're based upon, doing programs to serve a community that need us. So therefore now the argument for us, or the mission that was put on our table, was we have to demonstrate the need for us to exist. So we had to call all of our alumni, and like I said, we do small groups. So we have alumni over 5 years of our existence, number around 200 and just over 250 alumni. So our aim and our mission was to contact every single one of them, and it was to do so by any means necessary, whether that be on Twitter, on social media, on phone calls, emails, by any means. And then once we contacted them, it was to ask them a series of questions. How have they been impacted by the COVID? How is their mental health? What are their needs right now? And from the survey that came back, the needs were finance. There was definitely a deep financial need. At the time, the government wasn't sure whether they were going to have to process their taxes in order to receive CERB, and at the time CERB wasn't a confirmed thing at the time, but it was our responsibility to ensure we position our youth so that they will, if the CERB does come into fruition, that they would have everything that they need in order to make sure this was done. So our immediate emergency response was, we have to support them through this time, and some things that they were not aware of. So they were not aware of actual financial support coming through the pipeline. We were aware of it, so it was our responsibility now to inform them. Some of the other things that came back on the survey was, their fears of being isolated. If they have to stay at home, and they won't have any social interaction, so that was an issue. There was also an issue with food security. Some people just didn't have no access to food, didn't have the finance coming in order to pay food. So we had we had a whole list of issues that our members have and would possibly have coming down the line. Now, the way that our organization functions is that we have a programs team that's divided into two divisions. So we've got a program delivery service, so I'm the programs manager, and we also have a social supports team as well. So the social supports team really deal with those who are experiencing the extremities of their issues. The whole organization really stopped doing the regular programming and went into supporting the social supports. So to respond to their immediate needs, we developed a partnership with Food Share, whereby they delivered boxes for us, and then we can now every Friday deliver boxes to those of our membership that were at need, and then we could widen it out to the rest of the community as well if we had extra capacity. We developed a partnership with a driving company as well, so they're able to volunteer their drivers to assist us delivering the food. So it didn't always have to be the totality of the staff that were doing it. We're able to ask the community in order to do so as well. And we discovered all of the platforms, GoToMeeting, Zoom, WebEx. I find it very interesting that no one uses Skype anymore, but so if you're looking for stock in investments, do not choose do not choose that. However, we've been privy to using all of those platforms. So one of the things that we did do is now we can now utilize these platforms to engage further with our young people. So we one of the things that we did, all of us who work, we like to keep fit. So we decided to do online workout classes. So this way we could engage the members. Sometimes I run the classes. I try to run the classes sometimes as our operations director. And we also had guest facilitators that came in to run classes. We did one for the sector. Anyone could join for the sector. That was 8 a.m. in the morning, and one for the general community. That was 11 a.m. And we had even a fitness coach from New York who facilitated a couple of sessions as well. So that was, very interesting. And because our population is young, 19 to 29, I think one of the things was how can we develop our social media so it can seem exciting and have the general public, whether they were members or not members, they're just our demographic, want to be associated with us and want to be a part of us. So the programming took an iterative process, and then it must have been a month down the line, we decided, probably about 2 weeks down the line, we had an official program, which was considered our virtual online program. So if you press the next slide, you can see what the virtual online programming actually looked like. Well, you can stop right here. You can go back. Let me talk about, sorry. Go to the next slide and we can come back to this one. So this was an example of what our virtual program looked like. So we had the CFITs in the morning, we had the staff scrum, and then again, mindfulness and meditation. It really assisted the members that were dealing with being isolated and not having that connection. It was ensuring that they can be still develop their and strengthen their own mental health during these times and still feel part of a community. So this may be an online guided meditation, or it may just be a link to some type of video that could assist them during that time. We have C News. That was a new component that was developed. So this was providing up-to-date and relevant information to the community about what was going on and things that they needed to be made aware of in this time. 1 to 4 was case management. So this was really like a surgery hours whereby members and extended to the general community can speak to our social supports workers, and they could talk through any issues, anxieties or concerns and worries that they'd have. Issues with landlords, that was something that that came up, as well as the various different issues I really spoke about. And then we did workshops, online workshops. One of the ones that was really popular, and one of the things we used was Instagram Live for a lot of the our engagement. We used Instagram Live, so that was to do some of our live workshops, and then what you see at 4 to 6 p.m. on every single day, it was what we call the sector scrums. So the sector scrums was focused on re-engaging our previous cohorts, and it was done by PA, which is with the film, VFX, which is the digital tech, kitchen masters. You can see it down the line, the various different sectors that we engaged in. So it was very important for us before we started looking for helping individuals that hadn't engaged in our program, just to make sure that those who did engage with our program were doing well and were feeling connected. So if you look to the previous slide that you just went past, this was just an example of one of our sector scrums. This was the PA, the film sector scrums. So we would ask how are people feeling, and then people can also feel zoomed out. Like every week we're coming together for a Zoom call. So it was really worthwhile us giving tasks that individuals felt invested in during this time of isolation. So it was, you know, do you want to get together as a team and unit, re-engage, and maybe put on a film screening? One of the things we did, we connected them to filmmakers in Jamaica. We had a film scrum, like you see, with them being able to ask filmmakers from Jamaica questions. So we were always thinking, how can we make it worthwhile? Because yes, people are isolated and alone. They don't want to be bored. How can we make engagement with us fun during that time? If you go on to the next slide, again, one of the things we also were able to do was to integrate the various different cohorts that we had. So we may have never, like I started working 2 years ago at the organization, and me working 2 years ago, I wouldn't have interacted with someone who's part of the program 5 years ago. But the fact that they received a phone call from us just to do a wellness check-in, they were grateful. They felt grateful. Not that anyone should feel grateful, but they felt grateful that we, remembered them, even though some of our current employees weren't at that program at the time. But one of the very interesting things that we did is that the VFX sector scrum, they were getting ready for their internship when this COVID happened. So they were now left just to work on their craft, but have no internship guaranteed. It's still something that we're working on. But they were able to engage the previous years of VFX who are now working at a reputable company, Spin VFX, the name of the company, and they were able to assess their work and give positive critiques. So it opened new avenues of exploration of relationships. And the last one I'll talk about is the kitchen masters. That was very interesting because it started off as a scrum, as you saw with the various different individuals in the previous slide, and then it developed into, well, why don't we speak to some of the well-known chefs that we know in the city, and have them facilitate like a cooking workshop on Instagram Live with one of our staff members. And you can only ask a busy chef so many times to do this. Then we started realizing that, well, we've got a whole cohort of 9 different programs of kitchen masters and kitchen master alumni. So why don't we now have these folks teach someone from a different sector about how to cook? Once they get their good food delivery boxes, why don't they now work with someone from the social services sector or someone from the film sector or digital tech sector and teach them how to cook? So that became one of our most popular Instagram lives. I saw Melanie pop up, so I imagine my time's coming to a close. But yeah, so for us, it was all about how can we be nimble, how can we engage the community, and how can we appear to be fun online. And it's something that I feel has worked. We're now gearing up to do our first proper program with new people. So our social media will take on a specific digital tech format to engage that demographic, which is what we're doing now. And next week we're doing a special Black People in Technology Week just to promote that further. I finished.
Thank you, Yao, for your presentation, and also bringing up the important topic of how do we make virtual programming worthwhile. It's not, just about how do we do it, but how do we make it worthwhile for everyone. So it was really interesting to see your schedule, to see all the different activities you're doing and how you're really combating that problem. And our final speaker today, who's my colleague Erin Kang, is also going to be talking about this topic of how do we make virtual programming worthwhile through facilitation. And so Erin is my amazing colleague, but she's also an experienced facilitator, event producer, and storyteller. She's worked alongside the nonprofit sector since 2013, and we're really happy to have her on the ONN team with our Reimagining Governance project. Erin is going to share some of her best tips for facilitating and raising engagement virtually. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our incredible speakers for sharing all of these really amazing and innovative ways that you have moved your programming online. And such a great example of how you should be responding to your community's needs, not just trying to pump out new things all the time. So the big point of my presentation here today is to tell you that facilitation is key. And this is the case whether you are engaging mostly on an internal level, let's say with your team, you're hosting a lot of planning meetings and work meetings, or you're hosting a lot of public workshops, panels, socials, and live events, and other kinds of programming with your networks. And you may never have had to do any kind of online programming or facilitation before, and also might not feel like you have the time to learn about it, hire a facilitator, or even to actually plan and execute the work that you are trying to do. So really, hoping that these really quick tips will support you in that transition. And the first thing I want to tell you is that the word facilitate actually just means to make things easier. It's not just about creating and following an agenda. No matter the kind of virtual programming, what we're really doing is we're creating an experience. So start with the question, what would create the best possible experience? And this will vary whether you're planning a board meeting or a big town hall with your community. It doesn't have to be in big actions. If you have a host or a co-chair or a facilitator who's going to be running the meeting, I'm going to talk about some tips in a moment. If you don't have a specific person that is doing this work, ask yourself how you can design your programming so that it's doing some of that work for you. How can you design your virtual space? How can you design your invitation, your community guidelines to help you do some of the work that you might do in person, live, that you don't have the option of doing in a virtual space? If you're finding yourself hosting and facilitating online now, you also might have noticed that things aren't quite the same as doing it in person. And I will talk a little bit more about this, but the role of social support and cues is very heightened now. We don't have the same body language, social cues, the ability to have side conversations, step out into the hallway, as much as we did in person as we do online. And this is where facilitation becomes really important. And I will get there, but first I want to talk about communication. So sometimes we can get lost in the details of our work. We're planning, we're talking about it all the time with our colleagues. Try to step back and think, what would you want to know about your programming if you didn't know anything about it? And it seems so basic, but it's something that we can get lost in often. What information can you provide beforehand? Are you hoping or expecting your participants to know, contribute, or take away specific items? And have you told them that? It sounds really simple, but I've stumbled across a lot of really great sounding programs that I haven't signed up for because they sound interesting, but I don't have clarity on whether it's a talk, a participatory panel, a workshop. So really being clear about what you're providing and what you're asking your participants for is key. Great time to fact check your event descriptions, who, what, when, where, why. Building communication in means thinking about our natural pace as humans. So say you have a 3-hour meeting scheduled. Perhaps you need to build in more short breaks in that 3-hour time period, because in person, folks can step outside of the room, take a restroom break without having that built in. But because we're in a virtual space where it feels more awkward to step away from the computer, really building that into your agenda is really important. As well, we can't naturally expect people to give input, feedback, and discussion in the ways that we can in person. And so it's easier to talk over one another because of lag, to not talk because we're worried about talking over somebody. And so building in specific opportunities for feedback and discussion, if that's what you're looking for, is really important. We can't just let it happen. As well, you can also ask folks to step away from the computer. Okay, let's turn off our videos, let's turn off our microphones, let's go work on this stuff on our own for 15 minutes, and then let's re-huddle back. Okay, hand in hand with facilitation is hosting. If you're hosting, then host. Think about in real life when you're welcoming folks into a room, into a program, you're saying hi, you're introducing yourself, you're bringing them to their seat. That can't happen in a lot of virtual spaces. So what can you do to create a welcoming atmosphere for your participants? And this is a very no one size fits all thing. There's going to be a wide range of variety based on your hosting style, your event, your audience. Just some quick tips. Using hand raise or even just an actual physical hand raise or a vocal thing to do a roll call in the beginning is a really great way for large sessions to do a bit of an icebreaker and introduction without having to do a big go around. So, raise your hand or say, yeah, if this is your first time in a town hall, and doing a couple questions at the beginning of that session can really amp up that energy and let people know who else is in the room. Respecting people's time and space is also really key in the virtual arena. If you are going to be starting a session late, let your participants know. If you're going to be running late, let your participants know and give them an out if they have to leave. Again, the social cues and frameworks that we follow in person are not as obvious in a virtual space, and so it's really important to facilitate that in a much more intentional way than before. So things are kind of the same. We're serving our communities, we're doing our work, but also things really are not the same. And it's really important with this shift to be intentional about the decisions that we're making. So as we're all trying to figure out what to do, how to do it, there can be a huge pressure to just keep pumping things out. But acknowledging that things are different is really liberating. So asking the question, is this the right time for this virtual programming? Can it wait? Is it mission critical? Would it be more impactful and respectful if we did this in 2 months rather than now? So really thinking about the timing. Thinking about the approach. Does it have to be a live streamed event, or can you design a number of videos and infographics and resources that you can share with your community and reach the same goals in a different way? Zoom fatigue was mentioned. I think this is really critical and is also tied to an important consideration of access. Pandemic times have forced the veil back on really long existing inequities. And so thinking about who has access to a stable and consistent internet connection, the ability to devote 3 or 4 hours at a time to a meeting. These things are really critical as you're designing things for various communities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erin. And thank you so much, everyone, for the presentations. It was really, really interesting to hear all the very different, impactful examples that you guys had of transitioning programming online. Now I would like to transition into our Q&A session. We have tons of questions coming in, so we're going to try to get to as many as possible. But if we don't get to your question, do not worry. We will be sending you an email within a week that'll have a list of resources to help with your questions that we maybe didn't get to answer. As well, if you are wondering about the slide deck and the recording, we will send that as well within 1 week. So to get started, I have a question for the entire panel. And I think it's a really important one that a lot of people had brought up in various ways. But sometimes the audience that you're trying to reach and who may have the greatest challenges don't have access to the equipment or maybe just strong enough Wi-Fi to access virtual programming. How can we support these people during this time? Is there anyone who would like to take that one first? Sure, Liz.
I can say that, that touches on some of our other mission pillars around advocacy. And I think, some of the things that we are going to be focusing on coming out of this is looking at access and equity around some of these issues, particularly in the healthcare sector. So for sure, it is something that we need to tackle. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but it is, particularly for rural remote communities, a really important consideration.
And I saw that you had your hand up. Did you want to maybe touch on how you guys are thinking about this issue, or maybe trying to solve it?
Was that myself?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so this is one of the big questions that we had, because like I said beforehand, our up and coming programming is digital technology, and again, it's the most vulnerable individuals, and we're taking it as a given. There may be issues with access to internet, access to hardware, and access to software. So part of what we do in our program is going on a retreat very important for us to go on a retreat at the beginning of the program. However, we're in quarantine and isolation, so we can't go on a retreat. So therefore, it was really about, okay, well, how can we now divert the funds that we would usually go for, group outings, to now literally purchase equipment that we can give to our new members to on a temporary basis, so they can access the program. They've got very interesting ways in which we can now use our mobile services, i.e. Purchasing extra data on their phone so that they can use it as a hotspot, so that they can use the laptops in order to get strength. I mean, unfortunately, at this point, it doesn't seem like there's an answer to this question without an extra use of resources in order to fund that gap. But if it's possible to reallocate the resources that you would have got in order to do something else that required their presence, I think it's equally a compelling argument to say it's a critical component to the program in order to have our members access it, that we actually have equipment so that they can use it.
We've also been recognizing this as an issue, especially when we work with a lot of equity-seeking communities. And for example, we're doing a project where we have a community jury reviewing public art installations submissions, and it's with a Toronto community housing community. And one of the key things was, when we're hosting some of our orientations, our engagement, working with, in this instance, working with Toronto community housing to ensure that the approach is equitable and that those that are participating do have some form of access, as well as then simply providing some of the resources in paper format, so that the bandwidth of looking at visuals while having online communication is somewhat mitigated. And it's an ongoing conversation. It's for example, with the Jayu workshop, that organization provides a lot of equipment support, and for that particular project they couldn't do that, so we had to work, we shifted the approach to have artists provide existing work, but it's still not necessarily dealing with the very, very tangible issue of access to equipment and access to stable Wi-Fi. So I think that this is an issue that goes beyond our initiatives, and is a good indicator for calling for better access to internet services across the city, across the province.
Yes, and I think Yao also brought up a good point about the reallocating your resources, which brings me to a second question, which kind of builds on that. So if you have the resources to allocate, that's the best case scenario. But how do you transition to virtual programming altogether, even just the equipment part aside, if you don't have the resources or capacity? You know, Liz mentioned that a lot of organizations like Heart and Stroke are having to cut back staff. So if you don't have that technical expertise in your team, how do you find time to devote to it when you already feel so limited with your staff capacity? Liz, did you maybe? Oh, Erin. Perfect.
Well,
sorry.
No,
go
ahead,
Liz. Well, I was going to build what off you said, actually, about not letting perfect be the enemy of good. And it's so much easier to say than do, especially given the wide variety of work that happens in the sector. But really prioritizing what your activities are, from what is absolutely mission critical to what is a really nice to have, and being able to let go of those things even in the moment. And so looking back at your strategic plans, at your visions, at your goals as an organization, and really asking yourself, is this virtual program the right way to achieve this goal, or can we do this another time, or can it wait? do we need to focus on something else right now and then wait until we can deliver this programming with better capacity and with more resources?
Yeah, same. I mean, we've literally had to put great programs on hold right now because we just don't have the bandwidth or the resources to do it. And some of them are sort of bringing things online and into virtual spaces that we had an online patient platform that we were wanting to develop. So there's lots of good work that is just waiting, sadly, right now.
Just one more quick point, actually. Yao brought up a great thing of also leveraging the knowledge and expertise that is in your community. Look beyond your staff team, beyond the traditional places that you might approach to have expertise and capacity building in your teams, and really look at the resources you have around you. Often those are overlooked.
Perfect.
Could I also just jump in quickly on that point, in the sense that we are going through a time whereby everything is just changing, everything's malleable. So no one has all the answers. We're all seeking and finding answers. And I think to be able to put our creative brains to use would be amazing, which this is where the talents of artists really are, can be really valuable, because they naturally just think outside of the box. And to be able to use that resource to think outside the box, to say, how are we going to communicate when we can't actually be in the same physical space? What options are available? And it may start as something really wild, but it may get to a place whereby this is something that we could potentially do.
And just to build off what Yao was saying as well, our team definitely, doesn't have the capacity or all of the digital wherewithal to implement some of the visions and programming that we would love to see. And so we're looking at how can we build valuable partnerships. So looking at schools that there may be internship opportunities, that we can engage students in existing school programs to help pilot some of these programs to see, is this feasible? And again, making the not expecting perfection, as we're all kind of stumbling through this very much more digital world right now.
Thank you. And to close our webinar today, I just have one final question for you guys. And if you had one tip that you could give people about maintaining energy and creating a positive energy when you're doing these virtual spaces. I know, Erin, you touched on this, but we did have a lot of questions regarding that, whether you're doing live entertainment, you're doing a forum. What would be your one tip that you would give to the audience on how they can foster positive energy and engagement online? Erin, would you like to start?
Sure. I mean, look, being online is really exhausting, and to host all the time and even be a participant all the time requires a certain level of energy that we don't often ask ourselves for in in-person settings. So if you are gearing up to host something, build in time before and time after to get ready and unwind, because you as the host or as the team that is creating the virtual program are really setting that that energy. So it's not about the music, it's not about having a musician come in the break and singing you a song. Those are awesome, but those are just the tools at your disposal. You are the person who has to manage sort of the vibe of the program that you're running. So we have to be a little bit more self-aware. It does take work. It's not easy to remain engaging and attentive on video, and it is a skill to build. So be easy on yourself, but remember, it's all about your energy and your intentions.
Thank you. And Yao, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'd also say it's all about time. I think the whole world of the virtual reality world, cyberspace, social media, it's about how can you grab time. So one of the things I always do is just ask yourself, why would someone spend time listening to me, being part of our program, even being part of this? So it speaks to what is the value that you're doing. And to Erin's point, sometimes less is more. Like, I just looked at my watch and realized that an hour was gone. So this was definitely effective. And to be honest, if you were to say we can stay another hour, we probably would stay another hour. If you told us from the beginning it was 2 hours, we'd probably say I haven't got that time to stay. So to be able to offer something very small and over deliver, and have people wanting more, yeah, I'd say, you know, we got to use the entertainment framework to ensure that we can command people's time.
And Anjali, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's also understanding the community or the audience that you're engaging with online. So there's a very different feel when you're doing a more formal webinar than, say, doing an artist orientation or a studio workshop. I've allowed myself to be a little bit more casual in some of the online meetings, just, you know, allowing for that, as Erin mentioned, chit chat beforehand. And I've been finding that in some ways people are much more honest about what's actually going on in their life, because this is a strenuous time for all of us. So for me, it's not necessarily holding up a professional persona, but also sharing some of the struggles that I'm going through in this current situation, and allowing your humanity to come through, and allowing that connection, because we don't have that physical connection right now, but finding ways to make that connection, that we're not just talking to a screen, but that we're talking to other people that are in many ways being very vulnerable, allowing us to look in part of their home space right now.
That's a really good point.
The only thing I would love to add to that, because the first thought that came to my mind was being gentle with ourselves and gentle with each other, right? And I think right now, is we're all experiencing the virtual world, but also this level of anxiety and worry that we are all experiencing, that just, you know, presume goodwill and be gentle. That would be my only add.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much again to all the speakers for dedicating your time and expertise to this session. It has been so interesting, and we're really excited to be able to share this information with our audience. And for all of you who joined, thank you so much as well for, you know, giving us part of your afternoon. We hope that you are able to find some tips for your own organization, and as you work to transition programming online, please keep us in the loop and stay connected, whether it's on social media, it's joining a future webinar, or maybe it's signing up for our emails and telling us how your virtual programming is going. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.